Hey guys, tonight we time travel straight into the marbled chaos of ancient Athens, where the air smells faintly of olives, sweat, and philosophical desperation. Picture it: men in draped chitons, wandering colonnades, clutching scrolls in one hand, and their pride in the other, all while trying to master the art of love, or at least survive one mildly flirty conversation without collapsing into a metaphysical monologue. You're here now on polished stone under a honey-colored sky. Pigeons coo somewhere near the Parthenon. A man with a beard like a bramble patch is explaining the forms of affection to a woman who just wanted directions to the agora. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this with your modern sanity intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where we all drift off together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself on the edge of the gymnasium, a place where bodies gleam with oil and minds swirl with arguments. The Greeks love their debates sweaty. Athenians say philosophy is the highest form of love, which sounds noble until you realize it's mostly just an excuse to lecture people you're trying to impress. There's a man beside you. His name is Cleon. He's trying to warm up a conversation with a woman balancing a jug of water. "Do you believe beauty reflects internal virtue?" he asks. She blinks slowly, possibly deciding between flirtation and homicide. Welcome to the awkward start of Greek dating. Oil is everywhere. Not metaphorical oil, actual olive oil. It coats arms, torsos, even calves, glistening like some kind of Mediterranean SPF 15. Men use it as skincare, a cooling agent, and more subtly, as an excuse to rub each other down before reciting Homer. You too are handed a flask. It smells like earth and rain. You try it. It makes you feel slippery intellectually and otherwise. You learn quickly that in Athens, flirtation is intellectual combat. You don't compliment someone's eyes. You ask them how their soul approaches justice. Or worse, you ask them if they've read Gorgias. Even the most well-meaning men here don't date the way you think. They court ideas, chase ideals, and usually ignore whether their beloved is still awake. The idea of romantic conversation is less sweet talk, more metaphysical thesis, which would be charming if it weren't so exhausting. You pass a painted wall where someone's scrawled a joke. The only thing colder than a stoic's bed is his logic. It seems these woes are common knowledge. There's a symposium tomorrow, someone says. You're invited. Apparently, it's the big event: wine, reclining, and deeply passionate arguments about whether love is madness or divinity. You're skeptical, but you're also here, and your sandals are already dusty with the city's ambitions. Cleon is still at it. Now he's quoting Hesiod. The water carrier finally smiles, not with affection, but a kind of amusement. "Your soul's beautiful," she says, "but your breath smells like goat. It's the closest thing to affection you'll witness today." Fun fact, ancient Greeks didn't date in the modern sense. No cozy coffee shops or texts at midnight. Courtship was public, messy, often unequal. There were formal rituals, yes, but also a lot of confusion, much like now. Historians still argue whether Athenian relationships were genuinely romantic or simply social contracts dressed in poetry and perfumed scrolls. What's clear is that the Greeks were obsessed with love but not necessarily good at it. You spot a familiar shape in the crowd. Socrates, maybe. Bald, barefoot, and already locked in conversation with a small crowd of youths who look like they expected a party and got an impromptu ethics lecture instead. Someone bumps your elbow. You single, they ask. You nod. They hand you a tiny wax tablet. It reads, "The true form of love is unknowable." Below that, a doodle of two figs kissing. Romantic, debatable. Philosophical, absolutely. You wander to the marketplace. There, the sellers have figured it out. A cheese merchant flirts simply effectively, "Buy my feta and I'll smile again." There's honesty in commerce. You find yourself drawn to that something reliable in a sea of syllogisms. As the sun dips lower, you sit by a fountain. There, a girl named Thais offers you a honey cake and a story about how she once broke up with a Pythagorean because he refused to eat beans. "They trapped souls," he said. She rolls her eyes. "I just wanted hummus." Later, as you make your way home, you overhear an argument. "If love leads to madness, does that make us saner for being alone?" No comes. The reply: "It just means we're bad at parties. Your feet are sore. Your mind is humming. And love feels more confusing now than it did before you arrived." But there's promise, too. A promise that somewhere between the debates, scrolls, and awkward olive-oiled attempts at seduction, something resembling affection still flickers. Maybe not in the theories, but in the quiet glance, in the shared laughter over burnt bread, in the way someone lingers a little too long after offering figs. And so you keep walking. Plato's Crush on the Soul. You're reclining in a shaded courtyard, breeze tickling your toes, when you hear the voice calm, measured too smooth to be accidental. Love, it says, is the soul's memory of beauty. You blink up. There he is, Plato dressed in flowing white linen sandals, artfully dusty beard, oiled just enough to signal wisdom without vanity. He's mid-conversation, but every word feels staged as if he's practiced it on a dozen benches, and probably has. Plato's not just giving dating advice. He's explaining metaphysics with a side of heartache. You lean in. A young student sits nearby, red in the face, not with sun, but with the painful awareness that she may be the object of this semi-romantic sermon. She nods politely as Plato launches into what you'll later learn is his famed ladder of love. The gist: real love doesn't start with people. It starts with beauty, any beauty. A nice body, sure. But then you climb like a dreamy, sandal-wearing ladder climber toward inner beauty. Then the beauty of minds, then systems, then, ultimately, the beauty of the form of beauty itself. Yes. Plato believes that dating is really just a gateway drug to cosmic enlightenment. You can't help but admire his ambition. Imagine walking up to someone at a bar and saying, "Your eyes remind me of eternal truth." Risky. But that's Plato for you. The student asks gently, "But how do I know if my feelings are real?" He smiles. "If your soul remembers them, they're real." She looks like she would have preferred a hug. Still, Plato's ideas stick with you. There's something oddly comforting in thinking love has a purpose beyond hormones and awkward silences. Maybe it is a way back to something greater. Or maybe that's just what people say when they're scared to actually hold hands. You stroll through the garden of the academy where lovers pass each other notes scratched into wax. Some quote Euripides. Others just draw hearts and very questionable anatomies. Plato would be horrified, or maybe secretly flattered. Later you find him again speaking to a man twice his age. They argue about desire, whether it elevates or enslaves us. Plato insists it must be guided by reason, otherwise it's just a temporary fever. The older man scoffs. Then why do I still think about her after 30 years? Plato doesn't have a good answer for that. Fun fact, Plato's Symposium is one of the earliest texts to explore different types of love, from lust to spiritual companionship. It's also where Socrates channels a wise woman named Diotima, who taught him that true love isn't about the person, but about ascending to abstract perfection. Historians still argue whether Plato's theory was a coded reflection of real relationships or just an elaborate dodge around intimacy. Some say it was his way of dealing with his feelings for Socrates. Others think he was just bad at goodbyes. As the sun rises higher, you wander into a discussion between two teenagers. One clutches a lyre. The other has Plato's dialogues tucked under her arm. He said I remind him of divine order, the lyre player grumbles. I said, cool. Want to get lunch? He said, you mean descend back down the ladder? You snort. It's a fair point. Plato's love logic works better in theory than in the agora. Still, you admire its loftiness. There's something brave about chasing beauty with your soul instead of your eyes, even if it leaves you single at every festival. You stop to rest under an olive tree. Bees hum lazily nearby, and someone offers you grapes. You ask them what love means to them. They shrug. Someone who doesn't mind when you steal the warm corner of the bed. Not exactly platonic, but probably more useful. You can't help but wonder what modern Plato would be like. Would he host a podcast, The Soulmate Ladder with Plato? Would he ghost you for not appreciating celestial harmony? Or would he deep down just want someone to walk with beside the sea, discussing ethics and sharing figs? Night is falling now. The student returns her wax tablet full of notes. I think I get it, she tells you. It's not about falling in love. It's about rising toward it. You nod. And maybe for just a moment you feel something platonic, something gentle, something that transcends the sweat and sandals of the day. A connection not born of possession, but of recognition. You stand. The wind lifts the dust around your ankles. Somewhere in the distance, Plato is still talking, still reaching upward, still imagining a love that teaches more than it takes. You leave him there, unkissed perhaps, but unforgettable. Socrates gets friend-zoned. You're following the scent of roasted chestnuts through a twisting alley when you hear it a voice both gravelly and weirdly cheerful, like someone who just philosophized his way out of a parking ticket. You round the corner, and there he is, Socrates barefoot, stout, balding, and surrounded by a half-circle of painfully sober listeners. He's mid-question, which is how he always is. Is desire a weakness, he asks, or is it a misplaced yearning for knowledge? You're not sure what that means, but it seems like a rhetorical flex designed to dodge emotional vulnerability. Classic Socrates. One of the listeners sighs. Can't we just talk about love? Socrates blinks. This is love. He's not being difficult on purpose, probably. But you quickly learn something about the man. Socrates is the friend who turns every coffee date into a therapy session he didn't warn you about. He's also the guy who, despite being married to Xanthippe, more on her, soon spends his days talking about the essence of love, rather than, say, remembering anniversaries. As you settle down nearby, a woman beside you whispers, I dated him once. Briefly. She doesn't elaborate. Her eyes say enough. Today, Socrates is making the case that love is not about attraction. It's about the pursuit of what you lack. You love what you do not have, that he claims is the foundation of all longing. And probably why he keeps turning down actual affection, because to desire is to admit you're missing something. It's the philosophical version of ghosting. A young man raises his hand. So if I love someone, it means I'm incomplete. Socrates nods. Exactly. The young man blinks. That's depressing. Socrates grins. Yes, but enlightening. The woman beside you mutters, "He's definitely single again." Fun fact: Socrates was married to Xanthippe, who's often portrayed as argumentative, but she may have simply been exhausted. Imagine living with someone who answers, "Did you take out the trash with define trash?" Historians still argue whether Xanthippe was misunderstood or if Socrates genuinely drove her to emotional exile by pondering the moral implications of olive sorting while she handled 3 kids and laundry. Still, he was loved, revered even. Students followed him everywhere, eager to be told they knew nothing. It was a weird power move, but it worked. You find yourself nodding along before realizing you've been listening for 20 minutes and he hasn't answered a single question. You watch Socrates flirt, or well, his version of it. He's speaking with a merchant woman selling dates. She hands him one and he says, "The sweetness of fruit mirrors the fleeting nature of pleasure." She replies, "You want it or not?" He looks at her. Then for a brief second, something happens. His voice lowers. Perhaps love, he says, is simply the recognition of the eternal in the temporary. She hands him 2 dates. That was smooth, she admits. He blushes. You walk with him a while after that. Or rather, you walk while he questions whether walking implies purpose or simply forward momentum. You wonder how many of his relationships died halfway through the sentence. But is love even real? It's sunset now. The light gilds the columns of Athens like a myth in slow motion. Socrates sits on a low wall, chewing thoughtfully. Do you know, he says, that in every pursuit of love we are merely midwives of wisdom? You want to ask what that means, but you're not sure you can handle another analogy involving birthing ideas. He seems content, though. Alone but not lonely. Reflective. Someone calls him to dinner. He waves them off. "I'm full of questions," he says. Who needs soup? You leave him there, surrounded by silence and stray cats. A bit later, you meet someone who claims they once kissed Socrates during a symposium. It was like kissing a dusty bookshelf, they say. Warm, a little dry, and full of judgment. Still, they remember it fondly. You wonder if that's Socrates' legacy. Not passion, not romance, but memory. Ideas that linger. Conversations that haunt. A love so abstract it only really makes sense in retrospect. Like a missed train that taught you patience. Or a look that never became a touch. You pass his home. Small. Simple. Lit with a flickering oil lamp. Inside, Xanthippe's voice rings out, "No, I don't want to discuss the ethics of chicken again. You keep walking." Aristotle's stable marriage algorithm. You wake the next morning to the sound of scribbling. Not birds, not carts, but a man aggressively diagramming his feelings in the sand with a stick. It's Aristotle hunched and focused, drawing what might be a triangle or a very confused goat. He doesn't notice you at first. He's muttering things like eudaimonia, proportional affection, distributive justice in romantic partnership. You clear your throat. He looks up bright-eyed. "Ah," he says. "Would you like to hear about the mathematically optimal marriage? You're curious and a little concerned." Unlike his mentor Plato, who chases divine beauty and soul-scaling ladders, Aristotle is practical. Love to him isn't transcendental. It's a component of a well-functioning life, like teeth or clean sandals. He waves you over and starts mapping out what you now recognize is a very early version of what modern people would call a relationship compatibility quiz. He believes the virtue of each partner must be in proper balance for the union to be stable. Basically, Aristotle is that friend who tries to spreadsheet their love life. You sit beside him, trying to follow. He's breaking down 3 kinds of friendship, which he claims correspond to types of love. Friendship of utility. You're together because it's useful. Think power couple or two farmers sharing a goat. Friendship of pleasure. You're hot, they're hot. The chemistry is undeniable. Lasts until the party ends. Friendship of the good. The real prize. Based on mutual virtue and respect. Also statistically rare. He says the third kind is the best, but the hardest to find. Like figs that are both ripe and unbruised. Then he gets serious. You can only truly love once both partners aim at the good life, he explains, where each supports the other's excellence. It sounds beautiful. And also like a motivational seminar. He shares a memory of his wife Pythias. She passed young, but he describes her in terms of balance, measured laughter, graceful anger, appropriate silence. It's sweet, if a little clinical. Fun fact, Aristotle actually did marry, and though not much is known about Pythias, he later had a long-term partner named Herpyllis. He even wrote her into his will. A rare moment of softness from the man who once said, "A friend is a single soul dwelling in two bodies." Historians still argue whether Aristotle genuinely experienced romantic passion, or if he simply admired the idea of love as a moral collaboration. You ask him what he thinks about the concept of falling in love. He furrows his brow like you just asked if horses can read. Falling implies loss of balance, he says. Love should elevate, not destabilize. He's probably never sent a risky scroll at midnight. Later you trail him into the agora where he pauses to watch couples argue, laugh, hold hands. He's visibly observing like a botanist among emotional ferns. That one he whispers, pointing to a couple selling fish utility. Then to a pair feeding birds together, pleasure. And then to two elderly folks sharing olives in silence, the good. You suspect he might be narrating a nature documentary in his head. As you both sit beside a fountain, he tells you his theory about proportional reciprocity in affection. Basically, don't love someone more than they love you, or vice versa. It disrupts the harmony. You mention heartbreak. He winces like you said chaos, then says, heartbreak stems from misjudging character, or mistaking pleasure for virtue. Thanks, Aristotle. Very comforting. Still, there's an odd warmth to him. Maybe because he's so earnestly trying to map the mess of love into something livable. He wants people to thrive. He just doesn't always know how people feel. You share a dried fig. He bites into it thoughtfully. This is good, he says. Then adds, appropriately sweet, not excessive. You don't know whether to laugh or submit a food review to his ethics manual. You ask if he's ever been jealous. He admits yes, but only briefly. I determined it was irrational. You imagine Aristotle in an argument. He'd probably pause to assess which virtue he was neglecting before responding. My dear, I apologize for violating the mean of patience. Still, you can't help liking him. He's solid, measured. Maybe love needs a bit of that, less fireworks, more foundation. As the sun lowers, he gathers his notes and sand diagrams. If you seek lasting love, he says, look not to passion, but to purpose, that which helps you grow. You leave him with that thought in your mind, the image of love not as lightning, but as sunlight. Predictable, steady, just warm enough to grow figs friendships, and maybe if you're lucky, something that lasts longer than beauty. Epicurus and the cozy courtyard. You're dozing on a sun-warmed stone when you hear something unusual in Athens, a laugh. A real one. Not a sarcastic snort or a philosophical chuckle, but the kind of full-bellied laugh that only comes from someone who's just not worrying that hard. You follow the sound and find a garden. Not the formal kind with manicured rows and statues of angry gods, but a cozy sprawl of fig trees, mismatched chairs, and someone's abandoned sandal. There are loaves of bread on the ground, half-eaten. Grapes in ceramic bowls, people reclining, talking, sipping wine. There's no stage, no debates, no Plato-style soul gymnastics, just humans being pleasantly human. Welcome to Epicurus's garden, the ancient world's most misunderstood backyard hangout. Epicurus waves you in, already holding out a second cup. Eat, he says, talk. There is no need to suffer to be wise. You blink. That's it. Oiled wrestling, no soul ladders, no proportion of virtue equations. Nope. Epicurus is the anti-hero of Greek love philosophies, and honestly, it's refreshing. He believed in moderate pleasures, simple friendships, and avoiding pain. The goal isn't enlightenment, it's peace. And in this garden, peace often comes in the form of olives and good conversation. People make love too complicated, he tells you, chewing a fig. They chase what they can't control, status, beauty, immortality. But all we need is freedom from fear, freedom from pain, and someone who doesn't finish your wine when you're not looking. Someone laughs again. There's no pressure here to be smart, just kind. You ask if he believes in soulmates. He shrugs. I believe in people who make your shoulders drop and your breath come easier. You suddenly feel your shoulders drop. Fun fact. Epicurus had a bit of a PR problem. Later, critics accused him of promoting hedonism, orgies, wine binges, chaos. But in truth, Epicurus's idea of pleasure was more like reading quietly on a rainy afternoon, with snacks, ideally in socks. Historians still argue whether Epicurus's lifestyle was a genuine philosophical framework or just an excuse to avoid civic responsibilities. But his followers adored him and stayed, often for life. You spot a couple lounging on a blanket. She's telling a story. He's not interrupting. That's rare here. When she finishes, he just smiles and says, "That was good." No metaphor, no critique, just warmth. Epicurus notices you watching. That he whispers is the love of ease. It's not lazy, it's loyal. It's the kind that stays when ambition has left. You think about modern relationships, how often they're performance art, how people curate, plan, overthink. And here's Epicurus building love out of loaf sharing and shoulder touches. A young man wanders in, clearly heartbroken. You watch as Epicurus doesn't offer a treatise or a mythological anecdote. He simply pats the space beside him, pours a cup of diluted wine, and listens. No fixing, just presence. Love hurts, the young man says. Sometimes Epicurus replies, but rarely from the love itself, mostly from the fear we attach to it. That one lingers in the air like incense. You notice the garden attracts all kinds, old, young, loud, quiet. One woman is painting. Another is feeding a bird. No one's trying to impress anyone. And in that absence, something real starts to grow. You try asking a deep question. Is desire compatible with tranquility, but someone hands you a piece of honey cake and says, "Ask again after dessert." You laugh, then eat, then forget the question entirely. Later, Epicurus shares a personal memory, a boy he loved when he was younger. They weren't dramatic, just present. He once fell asleep on my shoulder mid-conversation, he says. That was the moment I knew I loved him. Nothing profound, just peace. That night, as the fireflies flicker and the cicadas sing like soft tambourines, you stretch out under a fig tree and think maybe the great Greek dating advice is just, don't make love a puzzle, or a power struggle, or a speech. Maybe it's just comfort without performance. You close your eyes to the sound of someone humming tunelessly. Maybe they're in love. Maybe they're just full of bread. Either way, you feel lighter. and that you suspect would make Epicurus smile. Stoic Tinder swipe left on emotions, you wake to the sound of nothing. Not birdsong, not chatter, just the deliberate stillness of people who've decided emotions are for amateurs. Welcome to the world of Stoics. You've wandered into a portico, a shaded columned walkway, where men in simple tunics stand or sit, in dignified silence, occasionally nodding, as if internally approving their own lack of drama. No one is lounging. No one is reclining. Everyone is upright morally and spinally. A man clears his throat gently beside you. He has the face of someone who has mastered the art of raising one eyebrow without judgment. Care for a lesson in apatheia, he asks. You nod. You're here after all. This is Zeno's crowd followers of Stoicism, a philosophy that views emotions like unruly goats to be herded, managed, and ideally ignored. They believe that love, like hunger, like fear, is a disturbance, something that threatens inner peace. And they've spent years learning how to endure loss, rejection, even passion, without flinching. Zeno himself is probably off somewhere contemplating the moral implications of misplacing a sandal. But his ideas live on in these practitioners who look like they could remain unbothered during a thunderstorm or a breakup text. You sit cross-legged beside one of them, a woman named Danae. She's sharpening a stylus slowly, evenly. Ever been in love, you ask? She shrugs, not unkindly. Once. It taught me about impermanence. You wait for more. There isn't more. She does eventually elaborate. She once fell for a sculptor, a man who carved emotion into marble while repressing all of his own. When he left, she journaled for 10 days, burned the entries, then thanked the gods for the lesson. That's Stoic closure. Fun fact, Stoicism wasn't cold, just deeply disciplined. Practitioners like Epictetus believed in virtue over pleasure, reason over impulse, and the ability to love wisely, not recklessly. They wrote moving letters about loss, but always wrapped them in philosophical armor. Historians still argue whether Stoics ever actually felt romantic love, or if they simply observed it, like astronomers studying storms. Detached, precise, slightly awed, but never inside the chaos. Danae walks you through her dating checklist. Is this person virtuous? Do they stir your reason or your weakness? Would they still love you if you lost all status, wealth, and teeth? You ask how many people passed that test. She says 2. One was a philosopher, the other a potter with excellent posture. At this moment, a young man approaches bearing flowers. Danae raises one eyebrow. Do those bloom out of duty or sentiment, she asks. He hesitates. I don't know. Come back when you do, ouch. You trail her through the agora where she points out romantic folly, like a birdwatcher spotting rare idiocy. See that man quoting poetry at the baker's daughter temporary madness. He'll regret the metaphors by noon. You ask if she ever misses being soft. She doesn't answer, but she fingers a worn ring on a cord around her neck. Just once. Then lets it go. Later, during a Stoic gathering, it's like a party. But with more silence and less wine, a young philosopher reads aloud from Seneca, who wrote eloquently about loving without being ruled by it. You may love, he says, but love with your eyes open. Know that what can be given can be taken, and still choose to remain kind. That's the Stoic twist. You're not supposed to feel nothing, just not be undone by feeling anything. As night falls, Danae sits beside you and asks, have you ever tried to love without needing? You shake your head. Try it, she says. It's quieter, but it lasts. Then she looks at the stars and whispers something very unstoic. Sometimes I wish someone would break through it all, make me forget every rule. She smiles softly, but they'd have to be very foolish or very brave. You leave her there under the constellations she knows by name but not by heart. The Stoics believe love, like everything else, is an opportunity for self-discipline, to care without craving, to hold without gripping, to grieve, yes, but with grace. You admire it. Even if part of you hopes someone someday brings Danae another flower, and this time doesn't flinch when she asks why. Cynics love without soap or shame. You're sniffing your tunic, wondering if time travel includes laundry service, when the unmistakable scent of onions hits your nose like a philosophical slap. Not caramelized, not cooked, just raw, bold, and unapologetic. You follow the trail, and there he is. A man slumped against a pillar, wearing nothing but a threadbare cloak, and what looks suspiciously like last week's facial expression. His beard is wild, his eyes gleam with mischief, and he's chewing on a garlic clove like it owes him money. This is Diogenes the Cynic, ancient Athens version of "Take me as I am cranked up to 11." He notices you and grins. Looking for love, he asks, spitting out a seed. Terrible idea. Ruins your appetite. You're not sure if he's talking metaphorically or literally, but Diogenes is hard to categorize. He's the kind of guy who'd bring a turnip to a wedding just to prove a point about materialism. To Diogenes, romantic love is a social construct designed to chain you to convention. And convention in his eyes is worse than plague. Or baths. You sit beside him more curious than hopeful. He offers you a half-eaten onion. You decline. He shrugs. Your loss. Aphrodite loves a brave tongue. You make a note to never test that theory. Unlike the Stoics with their stiff dignity, or the Epicureans with their soft comforts, cynics like Diogenes believe in stripping life down to the bone. No property, no shame, no emotional dependence. If he had a dating profile, it'd just say, no possessions. No filter, must tolerate public burping. Fun fact, Diogenes really did live in a barrel well, more like a large ceramic jar. He allegedly wandered the streets with a lantern looking for an honest man, but probably just trying to dodge awkward conversations. Historians still argue whether Diogenes' outrageous behavior was performance art, mental illness, or simply a one-man war against social hypocrisy. Either way, he got attention. You ask if he's ever been in love. Once, he says, with a goat. But it didn't write back. He's joking, hopefully. A young woman approaches, clearly intrigued. She asks, what would it take to win your heart? Nothing, Diogenes replies. That's why it's mine. She actually laughs, then walks away. You're not sure if she's annoyed or in love. That's the Diogenes effect. You notice his followers, yes, he has some aren't much better dressed. One is attempting to write love poetry using a fishbone. Another is ranting about how romance is a symptom of civilization's decay. It's like a very committed minimalist dating circle. You follow Diogenes through the marketplace. A vendor tries to sell him a wreath. Love offering, the vendor asks. Diogenes snorts. If your love depends on flowers, it's already wilting. Later, he climbs a podium and declares love is a leash. But I bite back. The crowd chuckles. Some boo. One woman claps slowly, like she's been waiting years for someone to say it. You start to realize that Diogenes does feel things. Deeply, even. He just refuses to dress them up. For him, vulnerability isn't in weeping, it's in pretending you're not already naked under all that societal fluff. As the sun dips, you sit with him on a stone step. He's feeding breadcrumbs to a bird and talking about his first heartbreak, a philosopher who praised freedom, then married for land. Diogenes never forgave that contradiction. You ask what advice he'd give a modern lover. Don't bathe in perfume, he says. Bathe in honesty. You pause expecting more. But that's it. It's not poetic, but it lingers like garlic on your breath. Before you leave, he scrawls something in the dirt with his toe. Better a rough truth than a scented lie. You glance back one last time. He's singing to the moon now, off-key, half-naked, entirely free. Love for Diogenes is not absence of feeling. It's the refusal to be trapped by it. And as strange as it seems, there's something oddly romantic in that too. The wild, defiant belief that you can be completely yourself, even if that self is eating onions in a jar. Pythagoras, polyamory, and triangle fetishes. You're wandering through a quiet school courtyard when you notice something strange: triangles. Triangles everywhere. Painted on clay pots, scratched into benches, woven into tunics like secret codes. You've entered a place where geometry isn't just math, it's a lifestyle. Welcome to the world of Pythagoras, where numbers are sacred, beans are banned, and love can be plotted with right angles. A young student beckons you into a classroom, if you can call it that. It's more like a temple meets chalkboard explosion. There are symbols carved into every surface. People are chanting numerical ratios in soft, rhythmic tones. A woman beside you hums a scale while gazing longingly at a pentagram. This isn't just a math club, it's a movement. And yes, Pythagoras is absolutely giving a lecture on how emotional harmony equals mathematical harmony. You sit down already confused. According to Pythagoras, the soul responds best to order measured, symmetrical, predictable. And love, if it is to be worthy, must mirror this. Not chaos, not butterflies. Just calm, calibrated connection. You watch as he draws two triangles in the dust. These, he says, are ideal lovers. Balanced. Complementary angles. Equal in weight, different in strength. Someone in the back murmurs, "What about circles?" They are promptly shushed. Triangles are the superior form here. Fun fact. Pythagoras founded a kind of cult school in southern Italy, where members lived by strict rules including silence, vegetarianism, and the absolute rejection of beans, which he believed contained souls, or possibly caused political uprisings, historians still argue. He also believed that music and math could purify the soul. So yes, this is the place where polyamory meets polynomials. You're introduced to a couple who describe their relationship as isosceles. When pressed, they say it's because they share two equal sides, intellect and loyalty, but differ in temperament, which keeps things exciting. You nod politely, not entirely sure what that means, but charmed by their commitment to the metaphor. Later, you witness a kind of relationship ritual. One partner plays a 7-stringed lyre, while the other solves a geometric puzzle. When they succeed, the class claps softly. This is considered foreplay. You ask a member if they believe in soulmates. She tilts her head. Souls are shaped by numbers. If his ratios echo mine, we resonate. You realize this might be the nerdiest form of seduction in history, and you kind of love it. In one corner, a man is reciting Fibonacci sequences like a sonnet. Another is proposing by offering a carved wooden dodecahedron. His partner beams. You remembered my favorite shape. You ask Pythagoras himself if love can survive outside of symmetry. He frowns. Disorder breeds suffering. Even passion must respect proportion. You wonder if he's ever had a messy breakup. Probably not. But he does recall a heartbreak once when a former student left the group to marry a non-mathematical soldier. She fell for someone who didn't even understand the golden ratio, he says. Tragic. You offer sympathy. He nods solemnly and begins tuning a monochord with what might be reverence or mild flirtation. There's something calming about all of this, actually. Here, love isn't wild or terrifying. It's predictable, shareable. There's a formula for commitment, for intimacy, for when to give space. And if things go wrong, they recalculate. One woman tells you she joined the group after years of chaotic romance. I used to think love was fireworks, she says. Here it's more like a lantern, steady and quiet. Still, there's an undercurrent of weirdness. The group forbids certain foods, believes numbers have divine powers, and holds midnight meetings under the stars to chant. You're not entirely convinced this isn't just a very coordinated dating cult. But the relationships seem solid, respectful, calm, until someone brings up the beans. One member, younger, rebellious, argues that maybe feelings like legumes are part of life. Pythagoras shuts it down with a single raised hand. Emotion without order, he intones, is rot. You leave before the bean debate escalates into a full theorem off. As you exit the courtyard, someone slips you a scroll. Inside is a simple drawing, two right triangles side by side, their hypotenuses gently touching. No words, just connection. You smile, because even if you don't understand the math, you understand the meaning. The symposium's sloppy spin the crater. You hear it before you see it. Laughter slurred philosophy, the clink of cups being raised and dropped with increasing enthusiasm. The air smells like spiced wine and old sandals. You've stumbled into an Athenian symposium, which is basically a dinner party with more speeches and fewer vegetables. Tonight's event, a raucous celebration of love, beauty, and whoever brought the good crater. You duck under a curtain and step into a room glowing with lamplight and layered with cushions. Men recline on couches, wine cups in hand, heads tipped back mid-argument. You recognize a few faces, Plato blinking slowly like he regrets everything, Alcibiades already shirtless, and a dozen others in various states of intoxicated enlightenment. This is no ordinary gathering. This is the symposium as later written down by Plato, and you've crashed it mid-conversation. Love, someone cries. Let us praise it. Or at least try not to fall asleep during this speech. You squeeze in beside a man who offers you wine diluted just enough to keep your dignity, but not enough to preserve your balance. He points to the center, where Eryximachus, a physician, is saying something about bodily harmony and erotic attraction, being essentially the same thing as good digestion. The room nods more out of politeness than understanding. Then it's Aristophanes' turn. The comic playwright, now very red in the face, delivers the most bizarre and heartfelt idea of the evening, that humans were once two people fused together, round and four-armed, split apart by jealous gods. Love, he says, is our eternal quest to find our missing half. Someone bursts into tears. Another falls off his couch. Plato's version of the event is elegant. The real version, a mix of sincerity, chaos, and poorly aimed toasts. You watch as Alcibiades, absolutely hammered, gives a passionate, wildly off-topic speech, praising Socrates, describing his thighs, his mind, and the way he pretends not to care but actually ruins your life with one question. Everyone claps, even Socrates, who seems weirdly flattered. Fun fact, symposia were real events, though only elite men typically attended. They mixed food poetry, sex, and philosophy with varying levels of subtlety. The Symposium by Plato is one of the earliest surviving literary parties on record. Historians still argue whether Plato's account was an accurate transcript or just a fictionalized fantasy about what intelligent men say when slightly tipsy. You glance around. People are pairing off, some for conversation, others for shadowy hallway wanderings. A man with a harp tries to woo a girl by composing a ditty comparing her to Athena's wisdom and a well-baked pie. It sort of works. You ask someone what love means to them. They take a long sip and reply, It's when someone listens to your worst poem and still offers you the last olive. Another responds, it's wanting to debate someone and never quite winning. Then Socrates rises. The room stills. He speaks quietly but clearly, describing Diotima's ladder, the ascent from physical love to the love of minds, then laws, then ideas, until you reach love itself, pure and eternal. It's beautiful. You feel yourself floating a little. Then someone throws a fig and ruins the moment. You step outside for air and find two guests arguing about whether love makes men weaker or wiser. One has wine down his tunic. The other just hiccups and says, I think I loved the wrong person on purpose, which frankly might be the most honest philosophy of the night. Inside, a drinking game is forming. Take a sip every time someone says essence. You decide to stay outside. A woman sits beside you, holding her sandals in one hand. You know what love is, she says. It's someone holding your hair while you weep into a pomegranate because your ex quoted Homer at your rival. You laugh, then hand her the rest of your bread. Back inside, the symposium is dissolving into the early stages of hangovers. Someone is asleep in a corner with a scroll as a pillow. Another is reciting verses from memory and getting most of them wrong. But no one minds. It's not about precision anymore, it's about connection. You leave just as the oil lamps flicker out. Your head spins, but your heart feels oddly full. Tonight, love wasn't a theory or a theorem. It was messy, funny, confusing, human. And maybe that's the truest form of it yet. When oracles play matchmaker, the sun is barely up when you find yourself climbing a steep marble staircase, trailing behind a young man clutching a goat-shaped offering and sweating profusely, not just from the heat, but from romantic panic. You've arrived at Delphi, the sacred sanctuary of Apollo, and the domain of the oracle whose ambiguous advice has launched wars, crowned kings, and apparently helped the lovelorn decide whether to text their crush. The man ahead of you whispers, I just want to know if she likes me. You pat his shoulder. Same. The temple is cool inside, smelling of smoke, stone, and aged incense. Priestesses in flowing robes guide petitioners forward. You're handed a clay token with the symbol for Eros scratched in and gently nudged toward a line of anxious men and women practicing questions aloud, like students before an oral exam. Welcome to divine matchmaking Greek style. The oracle herself appears, or rather, the Pythia, a middle-aged woman seated above a chasm, her voice half whisper, half thunder. She's chewing laurel leaves. You're told this enhances prophecy, or maybe just makes flirting feel less important. The young man ahead approaches, bows, and asks, will she choose me? The Pythia's response is immediate, poetic, and deeply confusing. When figs fall in winter and silence grows loud, the one who waits with calm hands shall gather honey. He stares at her, then nods solemnly as if he understands. He does not. You're next. You step forward and ask your own question. Will I find love in Athens or just more lectures about the soul? She breathes in the smoke, then intones, the heart that laughs at logic may yet outlive it. But beware those who quote Plato at dinner. Fair enough. Fun fact. The Oracle of Delphi was a real religious institution for over 1,000 years. People came from all over the ancient world to receive cryptic advice from the Pythia, believed to be the mouthpiece of Apollo himself. She often answered in riddles, some historians believe deliberately so, to avoid blame if predictions went sideways. Historians still argue whether the oracle's answers were based on psychological insight, clever generalities, or just a very good laurel buzz. Outside the temple, people compare notes. One woman says her response was, "Follow the goat that does not run." She's now dating a shepherd. He's slow-moving, she shrugs, but reliable. A man approaches you and asks, "What did she say to you?" You repeat your riddle. He looks solemn. Mine was just, don't marry a man who plays the flute with his nose. You both agree that's actually pretty solid advice. You explore the rest of the sanctuary. There's a smaller shrine dedicated to Aphrodite, goddess of love. The offerings are different here: combs, mirrors, poems scratched into bronze. You find one that reads, "He loved me in the morning, feared me by dusk." It's unsigned. It feels timeless. Nearby, a small group is gathered, debating whether love is fated by the gods or just bad luck wrapped in a myth. One insists their failed marriage was clearly cursed by Hera. Another claims they met their partner because they misread an augury and ended up at the wrong festival. Right temple, wrong goat, he says, smiling. You ask a priestess if the gods really guide love. She smiles, serene. The gods whisper. People choose what they want to hear. Later, at the foot of the mountain, a market bustles with vendors selling charms. Tiny statues, braided cords. Scrolls of generic prophecies like, "Your true love wears sandals," or "Beware anyone who speaks only in Homer." You buy one for the novelty and tuck it into your tunic. A child tugs at your hand and offers a carved stone shaped like a heart. "It's lucky," she says. "Put it under your pillow and dream of who you're meant for." You do. That night you dream of figs, sandals, and someone laughing across a marble courtyard. Back in Athens, your friends ask what the oracle told you. You pause, then reply, "She said, I'll know I've found love when I stop needing to ask about it." They nod. Then someone quotes Plato again, and you reflexively duck. Maybe oracles can't promise you love, but they can nudge you closer to yourself, to clarity, to the moment you stop looking for signs and start noticing who hands you the last grape without making it a metaphor. And that's not nothing. The love lives of dead heroines. You're passing under a colonnade bathed in golden light when you catch sight of something odd. A small, weathered statue tucked between two pillars, not of a god or hero, but of a woman seated stylus in hand, with eyes that somehow look tired and clever at the same time. You step closer. The inscription is faint but legible, Aspasia, companion of Pericles. Philosopher, teacher, possibly trouble. That last bit may be your imagination, but it fits. You've just stumbled into the quieter side of Greek philosophy, the women who rarely got symposium invites, but somehow managed to leave whispers etched in marble anyway. This section of the city is hushed, a little forgotten. You pass stone benches worn down by decades of sidelong glances, and an old bronze plaque half covered in ivy. It reads, "In this garden walked women who asked dangerous questions." You're intrigued. The first story you hear is Aspasia's. Though technically born in Miletus, she became a towering presence in Athens' courtesan partner to Pericles, and reportedly sharper than a fishmonger's blade. She ran a salon where statesmen and thinkers debated politics, poetry, and more scandalously listened to her. One young woman tells you Aspasia was known to critique Socrates himself. And he listened, she adds, eyes wide. He didn't even argue back. That's basically ancient Greek love language. Fun fact, Aspasia's influence was significant, but often minimized by male historians who couldn't decide if she was a genius or just a beautiful distraction. Some sources credit her with ghostwriting Pericles' speeches. Others try to erase her entirely. Historians still argue whether Aspasia was a true intellectual equal or simply a muse elevated by gossip, but her name survived in a culture that rarely carved women into memory, and she wasn't the only one. You learn about Diotima, the mysterious priestess philosopher mentioned by Socrates in Plato's Symposium. It's she who supposedly taught him the entire ladder of love concept. Some scholars believe she was real. Others think she was a narrative invention, Plato in drag, basically. Either way, her ideas reshaped how the Greeks thought about desire. She taught Socrates, one woman says, grinding herbs into a dish, and he taught the world. Funny how that works. You keep moving and hear stories of Arete of Cyrene, who ran her own philosophical school and trained over 100 male students, including her own son. Her motto, wisdom begins when comfort ends. You suspect she gave unforgettable side-eye. Nearby, someone points out the now cracked foundation of what was once a library. It belonged to Theano, they say, wife of Pythagoras. She kept the school running after he died and added her own lessons. What kind of lessons, you ask? Emotional balance, harmony in relationships, and probably how not to strangle your partner when they compare your arguments to a misaligned hypotenuse. You notice something else: these women aren't remembered with statues or dramatic speeches. They're found in fragments, quotes attributed uncertainly, anecdotes wrapped in disclaimers like, "she is said to have." Yet their influence hums in the background like an old song you can't quite place. Steady, defiant, undeniable. One woman, Callisto, says she left her family's pottery business to study love and ethics. She holds up a scroll with smudged ink. It's a letter from my teacher, Melita. She says love is a choice we remake every morning, even when it's raining, even when we're tired. You ask if Melita ever married. No, Callisto says. She said most men couldn't handle her footnotes. You laugh. As the day fades, you find a cluster of stone markers in a courtyard mostly ignored by tourists. Each one bears a name, most feminine, many unfamiliar. You kneel and read a few aloud. Leontion, Hipparchia, Timicha. Women who debated ethics, taught students, published treatises, and still somehow got footnoted in their own stories. You ask a passing elder why they aren't more widely known. She shrugs. History wasn't written by those who asked to be heard. It was written by those who didn't wait for permission. Still, you hear the stories now. And they matter. Because buried under the marble busts and loud symposiums are love stories too quiet to echo, not grand, not tragic, just real. Letters burned in fireplaces. Glances exchanged between scrolls, the decision to stay, the courage to leave. Before you go, someone presses a stone into your palm. It's worn smooth, the word arete carved into it. It means virtue, she tells you, but also excellence, and sometimes just choosing your own path. You close your hand around it, feeling the warmth of a dozen uncarved statues waiting. Public proposals and philosophical panic. The Agora is unusually crowded today, not for a festival, not for a war announcement, but for something far more terrifying, a public marriage proposal. You squint from the edge of the crowd as a nervous young man adjusts his belt for the third time, his palms so sweaty they could drown a scroll. In front of him, a woman stands, arms crossed, eyebrow raised, halfway between curiosity and don't you dare. He clears his throat. Sophronia, will you join your virtue to mine in lawful harmony under the gods and the guidance of Aristotle's ethics? The silence is so long, you hear a goat cough, and then no. A low murmur ripples through the crowd. But she doesn't walk away. Instead, she starts debating him. You've never seen this before. I admire your effort, Sophronia begins, but I find your understanding of partnership lacking. Where's the balance of thumos and logos? The emotional impulse and reason? The young man blinks. I brought sandals. Someone nearby mutters, he should have opened with Plato. Another adds, he shouldn't have opened at all. This is what happens when philosophy meets romance under pressure. And honestly, it's both painful and fascinating to watch. You hang back as Sophronia launches into a short but devastating speech, on why love without dialogue is just decorative captivity. You swear someone's taking notes. A potter beside you whispers, "She's been reading Aspasia again." Dangerous woman. And just like that, a proposal becomes a full-on civic debate, complete with hand gestures, counterpoints, and one extremely awkward recitation of Sappho. Fun fact, Greek marriage customs varied by region and century, but in many cases, women had little say in the matter. Marriages were arranged, often sealed with contracts and dowries. That's why moments like this, though fictionalized here, speak volumes about what we wish had happened, or maybe did in quiet corners. Historians still argue whether women like Sophronia truly pushed back, or if such resistance was erased, or worse, mocked into oblivion. But you're here now and she's absolutely schooling him in front of half the city. Eventually, the crowd applauds. Not because she accepted she didn't, but because she made him think. Later, you find the young man sitting on a bench, still stunned. "I thought she'd say yes," he mumbles. "You quoted Aristotle, you say, gently, but did you ask her what she wanted?" He groans and slumps forward. "Do I try again?" You shrug. "Try listening first." He nods like this is a completely new idea. You stroll through the agora where merchants now mimic the proposal for laughs. One woman sells figs while yelling, "Marry me, unless you fear my ratio of logic to sass." A man buying sandals mutters, "That's twice I've seen a marriage end in a footnote." You overhear another proposal, this time private, whispered beneath a laurel tree. A baker offers his hand to a poet. No speech, no crowd. Just a crumb of bread placed in her palm. She nods. Not everyone needs Plato to say yes. You stop at a fountain where a scribe is inscribing scrolls with dramatic breakup lines overheard from across the city. You peek over his shoulder and read, "He claimed to love my form, but misread my essence. She spoke of virtue, but kissed like a Spartan. Our ratio was never golden. You contribute one of your own." He brought sandals, but no soul. The scribe cackles and adds it to the list. Nearby, a young woman practices a speech about free will in romantic union. "What if we're just reacting to expectation?" she asks her friend. "What if love isn't choice, but echo?" Her friend sighs. "What if you just like the guy and don't need a symposium about it?" The woman pauses. "Still, it's worth considering." And so it goes, love as logic, marriage as dialogue, rejection as a civic event. As night falls, you return to the steps where the young suitor once stood. Now they're empty, the marble still holding the faint ghost of nervous footprints. You sit for a while. You wonder if ancient love ever just happened, quietly, without speeches or diagrams. Just two people who made each other laugh over burnt bread. Then you hear a soft giggle behind you. Sophronia. She's sitting beside the same nervous suitor. He's not talking, just listening. And she's smiling. Not a yes, but not a no. Just a beginning. Astrology, Aphrodite, and Athenian pickup lines. You're meandering through the back lanes of Athens when you spot something strange, painted symbols on a crumbling wall. A pair of stars, a half moon, and a goat standing on two legs. Below them, barely legible love begins when the heavens approve. You've entered the realm of ancient love magic, where romance and astrology dance awkwardly together, and seduction often involves scrolls, salves, and suspiciously pungent herbs. A woman named Thaleia, wrapped in layers of linen and glittering with bronze charms, beckons you into a shop that smells like crushed thyme, beeswax, and mystery. She smiles as you enter. Looking for love, she asks, already rummaging through a basket, or just trying to keep it. You're not sure, but you nod anyway. She lays out your options like a menu. Scrolls with pre-written love incantations to be recited under moonlight. Tiny wax figures meant to represent you and your beloved, to be tied together with red string and honey. Goat cheese metaphors, okay. This one's just a poem that compares seduction to a well-aged cheese. Oddly effective. This one, Thalia says, handing you a small vial guarantees a second glance, but don't use it near philosophers. They'll just ask you to define glance. She winks. Fun fact. Love magic was extremely common in ancient Greece, especially among those without traditional power, women slaves, the poor. They turned to spells, charms, and rituals in an effort to sway fate, or at least bend it slightly toward mutual attraction. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuinely believed or simply desperate hope wrapped in ritual. What's clear is this: where reason failed, magic stepped in, wearing perfume and carrying figs. You follow Thalia to her reading table where she offers you a horoscope. Let's see, she murmurs, tracing the stars. You're entering a Venus-Mars conjunction. Expect heightened charm and poor judgment. That tracks. You notice a line forming outside, mostly women. A few nervous men, all clutching items that once belonged to their crushes, hairpins, sandals, one very questionable piece of fruit. He touched this once, a girl whispers. Thalia nods seriously, placing it in a ceramic bowl beside a burning sprig of myrrh. Inside the shop, a pair of lovebirds, literally 2 doves, coo in a cage. Thalia says if they fly in the same direction after release, it means the relationship has Apollo's blessing. If not, well, there's always goat cheese. Later you visit a public shrine to Aphrodite, goddess of love. Offerings fill the altar combs, perfume bottles, handwritten pleas. One reads, "Let him look past her shoulders and into my soul." Another simply says, "Please, just once more." You light a small candle. For what? You're not sure, but it flickers calmly, like it understands. Nearby, you meet a man named Dorian who swears by astrology. "I only date Capricorns now," he says, shivering slightly. "After that, Sagittarius ruined my olive business." He shows you a chart explaining how Mars in retrograde makes flirtation risky. "Kisses go sour," he says gravely, "and sandals break at the worst moments." You nod deeply, unsure if he's brilliant or completely sunstroked. You pass a street performer reciting erotic poetry while juggling oranges. His rhymes are surprisingly moving. One goes, "Your glance a dagger, yet still I thank you. For wounds that smell of citrus are easier to bear." A woman tosses him a coin and a dried fig. He bows. The line between sincerity and satire blurs easily here. As the day fades, you wander the outskirts of the city, where private rituals are performed. You see candles arranged in concentric circles, love letters burned while names are whispered into amphoras, people murmuring promises into the night air. Some are hopeful, some are heartbroken. All are reaching. You sit with Thalia once more before leaving. She hands you a final item, a simple pendant carved with the symbol of Venus. "For clarity," she says, "not control." You ask her if any of it works. She smiles. Sometimes. But not because of the magic. Because people believe hard enough to change themselves. You walk home under a sky smeared with stars and smoke the scent of rose oil lingering faintly in your sleeves. Somewhere behind you, a woman chants a verse older than memory. And maybe, just maybe, the heavens are listening. Breakups and existential crises. You're sitting in a shaded courtyard sipping lukewarm wine from a chipped cup when a loud sigh disrupts the stillness. A man across from you is dramatically sprawled on a bench, one hand over his eyes, the other gripping a scroll like it personally betrayed him. "Let me guess," you say. "Breakup," he nods solemnly. She said I debated too much. You raise an eyebrow. And I responded by comparing her emotional inconsistency to Heraclitus's river paradox. Ah, well, there's his answer. Welcome to the Greek breakup, where heartache isn't a private matter, it's an existential crisis with footnotes. This man, who introduces himself as Lycon, explains that he's been spiraling ever since his lover left him for a merchant who understood metaphor without dissecting it. I told her love was like a syllogism, he moans. She said I was more like a tax document. Ouch. Around you, the signs of other heartbreaks litter the courtyard. Burned letters, sandals left behind accidentally on purpose. A particularly tragic lyre string snapped mid-lament. You begin to realize that for all their lofty ideals, Greek philosophers were terrible at letting go. Or at least terrible at doing it quietly. Take, for instance, the young woman a few steps away, whispering furiously into a scroll she'll never send. He spoke of virtue, she hisses, but couldn't share a fig without a lecture on moderation. She tears the scroll in half. Her friend pats her shoulder and says, "At least he didn't quote Pythagoras during your last fight." Fun fact, while there is not much written about ancient Greek breakups in our modern sense, we do know that romantic and sexual relationships, especially between men, often came with unclear expectations, shifting roles, and deep emotional fallout, especially when power or age dynamics were involved. Historians still argue whether these heartbreaks were taken as seriously in public life as they appear in private letters and plays. But the evidence, Athenian graffiti tragic poems, and one really dramatic staged monologue by Euripides suggest, oh yes, people felt things. You walk with Lycon for a while as he vents, occasionally quoting Plato, in a mournful tone that suggests he believes dialogue could heal him. I tried not to need her, he says, but then she made lentils that tasted like forgiveness. You nod. Lentils are hard to beat. Then he adds, I tried to reason my way out of loving her, but she smelled like early spring. And suddenly, for all his intellectual armor, Lycon is just another human trying to make sense of absence. Elsewhere, you pass a man smashing clay pots not out of anger, but because they used to share them. Another writes poetry on a wall, then scratches it out. One woman leaves pomegranate seeds in a line from her door to his, then stops halfway and turns back. Someone plays a mournful melody on a reed flute, and you don't know if it's for an audience or a memory. You pause at a public reading where a poet stands, eyes red, voice clear. I knew he'd leave as birds leave figs once full. I knew, but still I watered the tree. Everyone claps softly. A few people wipe their eyes. The Greeks didn't just experience love, they curated the downfall. Breakups were performance art. Catharsis. Sometimes literal thank you drama festivals. Later at a tavern you meet a woman named Eudora, who tells you her ex once tried to win her back with an entire speech comparing her to the polis. He said I was strong but chaotic, she says, sipping her drink, and then asked if I'd consider unification. You ask what she said. I said I'd rather ally with Sparta. Burn. But there's healing too. You watch as Lycon sits with another broken-hearted philosopher. They don't talk. They just pass a fig back and forth silently. The fig breaks apart, and neither tries to clean the juice from their fingers. Sometimes grief doesn't need analysis. As night falls, you overhear a final debate. Is it better to have loved and lost or never loved at all? A man with too much wine says, never loved. Less cleanup. A woman beside him leans over. But then who would have ruined your favorite blanket, he grins. You fall asleep that night beneath the stars, the sounds of a city mourning, processing, laughing its way through another romantic collapse. And you think maybe heartbreak was the one topic even Socrates couldn't question away. Lasting love, or just a good debate? The city is quieter today. The debates have mellowed. The wine cups are mostly upright. Even the pigeons seem contemplative. You find yourself wandering through Athens with a strange ache. Not the heartbreak kind, not the hangover kind, but the kind that comes from realizing something ancient and ridiculous and beautiful. The Greeks may have invented love just to argue about it. You sit at the edge of a sun-warmed fountain, watching couples walk past, some silent, some laughing one clearly, in a heated debate about whether affection counts as a virtue. A pair of philosophers pass you by mid-conversation. What is the role of Eros in the pursuit of truth, one asks. His companion shrugs. Sometimes the truth just wants a cuddle. You smile. Maybe that's it. Maybe all of it. Across the square, a stoic and a cynic are playing some version of chess with olive pits and broken tile pieces. The cynic has named his strategy emotional detachment, while the stoic insists his queen must remain celibate. You suspect neither is winning. Then there's Epicurean Timaeus, who now hosts quiet supper gatherings with friends and low-stakes poetry. We've replaced seduction with snacks, he tells you proudly. Fewer tears, more lentils. Even Plato's students seem less intense these days. One scrawls, "Beauty is a shadow on a wall." Another adds, "but still hot." Not exactly divine form, but refreshingly human. You spend time with Aspasia's students, now mostly women, debating love as if it were political strategy. Does affection disrupt justice, someone asks? Or is it the only thing that makes justice worth pursuing? No one agrees, but the argument is delicious. Fun fact, some ancient Greeks believed the highest form of love was philia, deep friendship, based on mutual respect and shared values. In many ways, they considered it even more enduring than romantic passion. And while the terms have evolved, the debate continues. Echoed in modern love songs, breakup texts, and late-night therapy sessions disguised as group chats. Historians still argue whether Greek love was noble idealism or neatly dressed obsession. The truth, like a fig eaten too fast, is probably somewhere sticky in the middle. As evening falls, you retrace your steps past the old haunts. The symposium hall is empty now, still smelling faintly of wine and regret. The oracle's temple sleeps. The scroll vendors have packed up, but the voices remain. You hear them in the rustle of olive trees, in the splash of the public baths, in the half-laughed phrases carved onto sun-bleached walls. Love without logic is chaos. Logic without love is lonely. Never trust a man who quotes Hesiod before kissing you. And then you hear your own voice whispering something new into the old stone. Love is the philosophy we never finish writing. You pause. Let the breeze lift the edge of your tunic. Let the dust gather in your sandals. Let the city exhale. And finally, after all the lectures, laughter, flirting, fig sharing, rejection, triangles, rituals, and metaphors, you ask yourself, did they ever figure it out? Maybe not. But maybe they didn't need to. Maybe the point wasn't to perfect love, but to keep debating it. To keep asking, trying, stumbling, apologizing, re-asking. To keep believing that somehow between awkward questions and accidental poetry, two people might look at each other and say, "I see your soul. Let's walk a while." And so you rise, because it's not over. There are still hearts to confuse, figs to share, and someone somewhere who won't roll their eyes when you compare love to the geometry of the stars. Word count, 100. Now, settle deeper into your pillow. Let the chatter of Athens grow faint like voices carried off by wind over sun-warmed stone. Let the sound of sandals fade, and the soft laughter of philosophers melt into silence, like old scrolls turning to dust. You've wandered far tonight, from olive groves to symposiums, from broken hearts to temple blessings. You've heard love spoken in riddles and reason in fig metaphors and laurel smoke. You've sat beside the wise, the weird, and the wonderfully unwashed. And somehow, through all the confusion, something true has followed you. Not answers, not clarity, but rhythm. The rhythm of people searching, asking, hoping, loving clumsily, courageously, constantly. So now let your breath mirror theirs, slow, curious, a little flawed. Let your body sink into stillness like a statue that no longer needs to pose. You don't need to define love tonight. You don't need to climb a ladder, master a theorem, or memorize a spell. You don't even need figs, just rest. Because somewhere in the timeless ache of wanting and wondering, in the laughter of broken syllogisms and soft candle-lit arguments, is the most human thing of all: to care. Even when you don't understand why. The city sleeps now. The gods are quiet. The philosophers have finally stopped talking. And you're safe. You're held. You're allowed to simply be. Good night, traveler.